She was being followed. A black woman, alone, walking home through the broken-lit streets of Seoul at 1 in the morning. And she knew. Not because she heard footsteps, not because she saw a shadow. She knew the way every woman who has ever walked home afraid knows. In the back of the neck, in the chest, in the sudden weight of legs that refuse to run when running is the only logical thing left to do. She was a nurse. She had spent 12 hours keeping strangers alive. She had done everything right. And still, there he was, behind her, closer with every block, hands in his pockets, that smile that appeared at the wrong moments. She dialed for help. The call dropped. She dialed again. Busy. The street lights ahead were broken. The street was empty. And her body, the body that had betrayed her once before in Lagos, the body that turned to stone when it should have run, did it again. She stopped. And then, a figure stepped out of the darkness in front of her. Tall, black suit, no coat despite the cold, and climbing up the left side of his neck, the unmistakable ink of a black dragon. The most dangerous man in Seoul had just stepped between her and the threat. But what she didn't know yet was why. What connected a Nigerian nurse to the head of a Korean Mafia organization? What secret had she unknowingly been carrying for 3 weeks without realizing it could get her killed? And what happened between them in the weeks that followed changed everything either of them thought they understood about protection, guilt, and what it means to be seen by someone who lives entirely in the dark. Before we begin the story, comment below where you're watching from and what time it is there. If stories about karma, love, and hidden truths resonate with you, be sure to subscribe to the channel. The night shift at Severance Hospital always ended the same way, with silence that felt too loud. Amara Osei walked through the side gate at exactly 1:17 in the morning, the way she had done 311 times since moving to Seoul from Lagos 2 years prior. She knew the number because she had counted. Counting was how she managed the hours between one crisis and the next. The hospital, the walk, the subway, the apartment. Repeat. She did not put her earphones in her ears. She never did. She wore them around her neck like a necklace, a habit she had formed as a teenager in a neighborhood where you needed to hear what was coming before it arrived. Some instincts do not leave with the passport. The first 2 blocks were normal. The 3rd block was when her body told her something her eyes had not confirmed yet. It was not a sound. It was a pressure. The particular weight of being watched by someone who wanted to remain undetected. She had felt it exactly once before in her life, at 17, on a street in Lagos. And that night had ended with her running barefoot because her brother had told her to run and she had not, and then there had been nothing left to run from. She did not run now either. That was the problem with her, the thing she had never told anyone. Not her mother, not her colleagues, not the hospital counselor who checked on staff after difficult losses. When the fear was real, her legs became stone. Not cowardice, something older than cowardice, a circuit that shorted. She tested the feeling the only way she knew how. She turned at the next corner. Not her corner, not her direction, and kept walking as though she had meant to. 3 seconds later, footsteps followed. She opened her phone and angled the camera screen like a mirror. A man, green bomber jacket, hands in his pockets. Close enough that his pace matched hers without effort, far enough to deny intent if questioned. She dialed her colleague, Park Ji-yeon. The call dropped. She dialed again. Busy signal. The street ahead stretched into a corridor of broken light. The municipal lamps on that block had been reported to the district office 4 times, according to the notice posted on the community board near her building. Nothing had been done. She had walked past the notice every day without thinking of what it meant at 1 in the morning. Now she thought of it. The footsteps behind her accelerated. Her legs stopped working. She was not dramatic about it. There was no stumble, no gasped breath. She simply stopped in the middle of the pavement with her phone in her hand and her mochila held with both arms against her chest. And her body refused the instruction to move. It happened in less than 2 seconds. It had always happened in less than 2 seconds. And in those 2 seconds, a figure stepped out of the shadow at the far end of the street. He did not emerge from a doorway or an alley. He simply became visible, as though he had been part of the architecture and had decided, at that precise moment, to be a person instead. Tall, black suit, no coat despite the cold, and climbing up the left side of his neck, disappearing beneath his jaw, the unmistakable ink of a black dragon. He did not look at Amara. He looked past her. The footsteps behind her stopped. Kwon Jaeho said 4 words in a voice that contained no elevation, no urgency, no emotion that she could identify. The voice of a man for whom outcomes were decided before conversations began. "You are on mine." Behind her, she heard the sound of a man who had made a calculation and revised it. Retreating footsteps. Then nothing. Jaeho finally looked at her. She was already looking back at him with the expression she used on patients who had flatlined and returned. The look that said, "I see you. I do not yet know what you are, but I see you." "Who are you?" she asked in Korean, her Nigerian accent rounding the syllables into something that sounded almost like a different language. He was quiet for a moment that lasted longer than silence usually lasted. "Someone who walks this district every night," he said. "Same as you." She did not sleep that night. Not because of the man in the green jacket, though his face stayed with her, that restless smile appearing at the wrong moment, the hands always in the pockets as though concealing something he had not yet decided to use. She had seen dangerous men before. The hospital received them with the same paperwork as anyone else. Danger, in her experience, announced itself clearly if you knew the signs. What kept her awake was the other one. She lay on her back in this small apartment in Mapo district, staring at the water stain on the ceiling that she had been meaning to report to the building manager for 6 weeks. And she thought about a man who had spoken 4 words and caused another man to disappear. The economy of it. The complete absence of theater. In Lagos, power performed itself loudly. Raised voices, visible weapons, the careful choreography of dominance. What she had witnessed in that street was something different. Something that did not need to be seen to be understood. She thought about the dragon on his neck. She thought about the way he had looked at her afterward. Not with hunger, not with calculation, but with something closer to recognition. As though she were a variable he had already accounted for. In the morning, between the end of one shift and the beginning of another, she described the tattoo to Kim So-yeon at the reception desk. She kept her voice neutral, the way she kept her voice neutral in delivering information to families that had not yet understood what the information meant. So-yeon put down her coffee. "Where did you see that?" "On the street. Last night." So-yeon looked at her for a long moment. The particular look of someone calculating how much to say and to whom. "That's Kwon Jaeho," she said finally. "They call him Quisin. It means ghost." "Amara." She lowered her voice. "How close were you?" "Close enough to ask him his name." So-yeon picked up her coffee again with both hands, which was how Amara knew she was unsettled. People don't usually get that close and then come back to work the next morning. Over the following 48 hours, Amara learned everything the hospital staff knew about Kwon Jaeho, which was simultaneously too much and not enough. She learned about the Huk-Yong, the Black Dragon organization that controlled 3 districts and operated behind a restaurant in Gangnam, and 2 companies that filed taxes correctly and on time. She learned about the cases that never became prosecutions, the witnesses who revised their statements, the detectives who transferred to different precincts without explanation. She learned that the man in the green jacket, whose name she did not yet know, belonged to a rival organization called the Peksa, the White Cobra, and that the tension between the two had been escalating for months like a barometric pressure that everyone could feel and no one discussed openly. She learned none of this changed what she needed to do the following night, which was walk to the subway. She told herself it was routine. The body, once forced back into motion, needed to prove it could repeat the act. She had read that somewhere in a psychology text during nursing school, that avoidance compounded fear rather than resolving it, that the nervous system required successful repetitions to override the memory of failure. She believed this completely and walked out the side gate at 1:19 a.m., knowing it was not the only reason she was taking the same route. The man in the green jacket was there before she reached the second corner. This time, he was not pretending to walk in the same direction. He was standing still on the opposite side of the street with his hands in his pockets. And that smile, that particular smile that appeared at the wrong moments, as though he found the anticipation of something more interesting than the thing itself. He was not alone. There was another man beside him, broader, watching her building's entrance rather than her. Amara's phone was already in her hand. She was already doing the calculation. Hospital security, main entrance, 40 meters behind her. When she registered the shadow against the wall to her left, Jaeho had been there before she arrived. She understood, in that moment, that he had been there before she arrived every night this week. He was not passing through the district. He was watching over it. She crossed the street and walked directly to him, which she could see by the slight shift in his posture was not what he had expected. "Why are you here again?" she asked. He was quiet for a moment, then, "Wrong question." "What's the right one?" "Why is he?" His name, she learned, was Shin Do-hyun. Jaeho did not offer this information freely. He offered it the way he offered everything, in pieces, with pauses between them that functioned less like hesitation and more like doors being unlocked one at a time. She was standing beside him against the wall, close enough that she could see the detail of the dragon tattoo where it disappeared beneath his jaw, and he spoke without looking at her, his eyes tracking the 2 men across the street with the patience of someone who had learned long ago that watching was more useful than acting. 3 weeks ago, he said, "A man was brought into your hospital." She waited. 2 gunshot wounds. No identification. No emergency contact. He was admitted under a protocol for unidentified patients. She remembered. She did not say so yet. "He survived," Jaeho continued, "which means someone kept him alive through the night. Someone who asked no questions and followed the protocol exactly as written." "That's the job," she said. "Yes." He finally looked at her. "And because you did your job, they believe you know things. Names. What he said in the moments before sedation. What documents may have been in his clothing." "There were no documents." "I know that." "Then tell them." Something moved across his face. Not quite a smile, not quite its opposite. The expression of a man explaining a rule of physics to someone who had never needed to understand it before. "The Beksa does not take my word for things," he said. "We are not in a period of trust." The 2 men across the street had not moved. Do-hyun's smile had not changed. It occurred to Amara, standing there in the broken light of a district that apparently constituted some kind of invisible border, that she had walked this same street 312 times without understanding what it was. A line, a territory, a place where two silences pressed against each other and the pressure occasionally became something visible. She had walked through the middle of it every night, carrying her backpack and her earphones and her grief about patients she could not save. And no one had told her, because to everyone who lived inside this world, the borders were as obvious as walls. "How long?" she asked. "How long what? How long will they believe I know something?" He was quiet. That particular quiet that she was beginning to understand meant the answer was not one he wanted to give her. "Until they find a reason to believe otherwise," he said. "Or until the situation between our organizations resolves." "And when does that happen?" He looked back across the street. She had her answer. She went to work the next morning and did her job and did not tell anyone what she now understood about her situation, because there was nothing useful that telling anyone would accomplish. She was not in danger from a person or an incident. She was in danger from a perception. And perceptions, in her experience, could not be resolved by hospital security or police reports. They required either time or evidence. And she had been given neither. What she had been given, without asking for it, was Kwon Jaeho standing in her district every night. She did not know how to feel about this. She catalogued it the way she catalogued complicated patient cases, set it aside, observed it, waited for more data. The data arrived on a Thursday. She came through the side gate at 1:23 a.m. and reached the parking structure on the adjacent block, where 3 nights ago there had been 2 men, and now there were 4. They did not pretend this time. 2 of them stepped directly into her path before she could adjust her direction. And the calculation she had been running, hospital security, main entrance, distance, probability, collapsed into something much simpler and much worse. One of them said something in Korean that she understood completely, which was almost more frightening than not understanding it. They were not there for information. They had decided she was a liability. She heard running footsteps from the far end of the structure. Not hers. She was still frozen, the circuit shorting again in the same way it always had. And then Jaeho was there with 3 of his men. And what followed lasted 89 seconds by the count she made afterward, because counting was how she managed what her body refused to process in real time. When it was over, Jaeho turned to her. His knuckles were marked. His expression was the same as it always was, that unreadable stillness, the face of a man who had learned not to show the cost of things. "Are you hurt?" he asked. She looked at him for a long moment, at the dragon on his neck, at the hands that had just done what she had just watched them do, at the man standing in a hospital parking structure at 1 in the morning because a nurse from Lagos had saved the wrong patient and now existed in the wrong equation. "Why do you have a dragon tattoo?" she said. "But you stop in front of children's charity posters." He opened his mouth. He closed it. In 36 years, Kwon Jaeho had never been asked a question he could not answer until a woman in a white nurse's coat asked him one in a parking structure at 1 in the morning. And the silence that followed was the loudest thing she had ever heard from him. He came to her on a Tuesday afternoon. Not at night, not in shadows, not standing against a wall with the patience of architecture. He walked through the main entrance of Severance Hospital at 2:14 in the afternoon, in his black suit, with his white shirt open at the collar. And he stood at her station with his left hand pressed against his side in a way that she recognized before he said a single word. "How bad?" she asked. "Manageable," he said. "That's not a medical assessment." "No," he agreed. "It isn't." She took him to a procedure room at the end of the corridor, the one used for minor interventions, the one with the frosted glass window that showed only shapes and light from the outside. She closed the door. She helped him remove the jacket and saw the improvised dressing beneath. Cloth, not gauze, pressed with the precise pressure of someone who had done this to himself before and knew exactly how much compression was required to walk 11 blocks without losing enough blood to change his color. She removed the dressing without commentary. The wound was a clean laceration. Knife, not bullet. Right flank. Deep enough to require sutures, but not deep enough to have reached anything vital. She had seen worse on Tuesday afternoons. She had seen worse on quiet Sunday mornings. She prepared the suture kit in silence. "You could have gone to a doctor," she said. "I have doctors," he said. "Then why?" "Because they work for me," he said, "and I needed someone who didn't." She understood this completely. It was the same reason patients sometimes told nurses things they would never tell physicians. Not because nurses knew more, but because the power differential was different. And sometimes a person needed to speak into a space where their words would not be managed or redirected or filed somewhere that others could access them. She began to suture. He spoke. He did not use names. He did not use organizational terms or reference anything she could have repeated to anyone with damaging specificity. He spoke the way people spoke in the deepest hours of night shifts, in the grammar of exhaustion, where precision gave way to something more essential. He spoke about a car. About a night 5 years ago when an order had been given without complete information, the way orders were sometimes given in worlds where information was currency, and currency was power, and power moved faster than verification. He spoke about discovering afterward what had been in the car that should not have been. Who had been in the car? He did not say his sister's name. He did not need to. Amara sutured in silence and listened the way she had been trained to listen, fully, without the internal preparation of a response, without the subtle withdrawal that people performed when information became too heavy. She had sat with dying patients and listened to things that had nowhere else to go. She knew how to hold weight that was not hers without pretending it weighed nothing. When she tied the final suture, she set down the instrument and said, "The man you had me save. The one from 3 weeks ago." Jaeho looked at her. After he was stabilized and transferred, the staff found his wallet in the room. There were things in it that triggered a mandatory report. She paused. "He's currently under investigation. Has been for 11 days. The room was very quiet. "I saved his life," she said, "because that's what I do. I don't choose. I don't calculate. I just keep people alive and let everything else be someone else's work." She looked at him directly. "You protect this district because that's what you do. I don't think you chose it either. I think it chose you a long time ago, and you've been living inside it ever since." He said nothing. "Your sister," she said. "She would have been very good at this." Something moved across Kwon Jaeho's face. Not breaking, nothing so dramatic as breaking, but a shifting. The way a building shifts in an earthquake, imperceptible from outside, registered only by instruments calibrated to detect what the eye cannot. He stood. He put on his jacket with the careful movements of a man managing pain he would not name. He reached into his inside pocket and placed a card on the tray beside the suture kit. No name on it, just a number. "If they come back," he said. "They won't," she said. "Do-hyun was taken by his own organization 2 days ago. I heard it from So-yeon this morning." He paused at the door. "How did you know his name?" he asked. "You told me," she said. 3 weeks ago, against that wall. You said, wrong question. What's the right one? Why is he—" She held his gaze. I listen, Jaeho. It's the whole job. He looked at her for a moment that contained several things she did not attempt to name. Then he left. She stood in the procedure room with the suture kit and the card, and the particular silence that follows a conversation that has said everything it intended to say, and nothing it was not ready to say yet. Outside the frosted glass, the hospital moved in its usual rhythms, the shapes and sounds of people being kept alive by other people. The whole enormous, ordinary machinery of survival. She picked up the card. She did not throw it away. That night, she walked home the same route, same broken streetlights, same 14 minutes, same earphones around her neck, not in her ears. At the third corner, she did not feel the pressure of being watched. She felt something else entirely, quieter, steadier, and far more difficult to name. The particular weight of being known by someone who moved through the world in darkness and had, for reasons neither of them had fully articulated, decided that her light was worth standing near. She did not look for him in the shadows. She did not need to. She already knew he was there. If this story moved something inside you, pause for just a moment and ask yourself, have you ever been protected by someone the world told you to fear and had to decide whether to trust what you felt over what you'd been told? Have you ever carried a grief so heavy that you stopped letting people close enough to see it until someone asked exactly the right question at exactly the wrong moment? And have you ever saved someone, not knowing whether they deserved it, and found out later that doing the right thing, without judgment, without conditions, was the most powerful choice you could have made? Tell us your story in the comments. We read every single one. And if you believe in stories about redemption, human connection, and the kind of courage that doesn't make a sound, don't forget to subscribe to the channel.